Okay.
And Bob Gale, if you want to just be ready to pick up when Kevin has to step out, he'll take us through that part.
Oh, okay, great. Sure, thanks. Sorry I got on late.
All right, welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and start today's meeting. I'd like to do a roll call. I will call out the subcommittee members' names and you can just say here, and then we'll move over to staff. I'm Kevin Conracode. I'm the chair of the Passive Recreation Subcommittee. And up next is Anna Babcock.
Anne, you're on mute.
Here, sorry.
And Bob Gale.
Here.
Bob Turner.
Bob Turner is here.
David Burdett.
David, I saw you unmute, but I didn't hear anything.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm here.
And Lana Richards.
Okay, on the staff side, I am Rachel Sawyer, and I'll introduce my role since we have so many different county staff on the line. I think that's a helpful piece to include. My role is Strategic Partnerships Director, and I'm the primary liaison helping provide coordination to the Passive Recreation Land Subcommittee at this time. I'll call the staff that I see on the line. Allison.
Allison Daines, Parks and Recreation Director for Buncombe County. Thank you.
Amy.
Amy Broughton, County Legal, just here to answer questions.
Angelica.
Angelica Tyler, I'm with the county's communication and public engagement team.
Angelin.
Hey, I'm Angelin Johnson. I'm a grants manager here in Strategic Partnerships.
Jennifer.
Good morning, everyone. Jennifer Harrison, Ag and Land Resources.
And Wayna.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wayna Smith. I am the Community Equity Inclusion Analyst for the Equity and Human Rights Office.
Robert.
I am Robert Brown, and I'm representing General Services, the project manager.
Sarah.
Sarah Joss. I'm another grants manager in the Strategic Partnerships Department.
Tim.
Morning, everyone. My name is Tim Love, Assistant County Manager. I've worked with many of you. Looking forward to participating in this process with y'all. Hope you're doing well. Staying dry.
And Thomas.
Yeah, Thomas Gold, Principal Park Planner with Buncombe County Parks and Rec.
Kevin, if you're speaking, we're not hearing you. I know you said you had headset issue earlier.
Yeah, my apologies. The Zoom froze up there for a moment. Next agenda item will be to approve the minutes from August 20th, which was included in the email for the Zoom link for this meeting, and to approve today's agenda. For subcommittee members, all in favor of approving today's agenda and the minutes from August 20th, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I have muted. Sorry.
All right, any opposed? Say aye. All right, thank you, Gail. The agenda and minutes are approved, and we can move forward with the follow-up info for the Weaverville watershed.
Just for your awareness, those numbered items 1 through 6 are the items in the board packet, which staff or members of the public can follow along with. The next item of business is public comment. Do I sound staticky?
You sound fine.
Okay, just to my own self. The public comment has typically been at the end of the agenda as staff was preparing this agenda and consulting with our county legal to try to figure out how to be as responsive to those that are wishing to provide input and to stay in line with the governing document for this committee. We've moved public comment from the end of the agenda where we typically see it to the first item of business before we get into the project material. So I will drop my screen share and pass to Angelica.
Hi all. I wanted to go over the directions for our viewers online of how to do the virtual public comment. I'm seeing someone already in the queue, and I'll let them speak in just a moment. But just make sure to dial in this number, enter the meeting code, and you'll select 3 to say that you would like to enter a public comment today. You are limited to 3 minutes. I will also give the hint, this is a little bit different for virtual public comment, that you should, if you are watching this live stream, either through YouTube or through the public input live stream, go ahead and mute your speakers. Otherwise, you're going to hear an echo. Make sure your speakers or your volume is down on whatever device you're watching. That will greatly help. And I will go ahead and enter the first speaker.
Hi, this is Emily Boyd, and I am going to be talking about the Weaverville Watershed Park. First, I want to say thank you to the subcommittee members and the Buncombe County staff that has facilitated the subcommittee process. You have given a lot of your time to thoroughly consider all of the projects before you, and I really do appreciate that. At this point, my concerns about the current plan for the Weaverville Watershed Trail System are well documented, and I don't want to rehash those. However, there are 2 points I would like you to consider as you discuss and vote on the project today. First, please consider that the town of Weaverville does not have the staff available to plan, execute, and manage this proposed park. I saw a close friend this past weekend who happens to be president of the North Carolina American Planning Association and assistant director of planning in Raleigh. I described what is happening with the Weaverville project, and she said it is actually a common problem right now. There's a lot of money available for park projects, but smaller municipalities are having a hard time building and managing them. If you choose to fund this project, please consider what you can require of Weaverville to help them successfully build and manage the project. They have stated that they intend to do some community engagement and engineering studies, but they have not yet done anything. Can you establish some contingencies so that they don't just build the project as planned once you have approved the funding? Second, please consider reserving extra grant funds for this project. If the town of Weaverville is truly committed to exploring other parking options closer to Weaverville, they will need additional funds to purchase either land or easements to make that happen. They have committed to exploring other options, but did not ask for any additional funding. I fear that they may explore the options, but ultimately cite a lack of funds as a reason not to pursue them. Thanks again for your thoughtful consideration of this project. I look forward to hearing your discussion, and I think it was a great idea to move the public comment to the beginning of the meeting. So thank you, staff, for that.
Thank you for your comments.
Hey, right now I don't see anyone else waiting in the queue. I'll give people maybe 30 more seconds to either enter that meeting code and select 3 to let me know you'd like to be a speaker. Otherwise, we just have a few folks listening in online. not necessarily wanting to be in public comment. All right, so it looks like no one else is registering to speak, and I think we can officially close public comment. I'm so sorry. It looks like we had one person sneak in at the last second. Would the board be open to hearing another public comment?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. I will go ahead and connect that person.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon. This is Jill Raymond. I apologize. I had a little problem with calling in, and I appreciate you taking my comments today. I would also like to thank the subcommittee and all of the town to seeming to come a little more responsive to the Weaverville watershed project. I have donated, I'm in process of donating 40 acres in which can be built, on, because it's not in a conservation easement that attaches to the Weaverville watershed. I have been contacted, and the information that I've been asked to provide is what I expect from Weaverville with the donation. And since I am planning on making a full donation and not requiring any payment for this property, I would expect the Weaverville to pay for the surveying, anything that goes with this property, and my family not incurring any of those costs. And I will get that down in writing and out to you all by tomorrow, so you can have that and see, and also plan for the finances for this. Also, when I was at the meeting the other week, I spoke with some of the pickleball women, and I think this plan seems like it services Weaverville in a much better way than driving up to Elk Mountain Scenic Highway. So I really hope that you all wrap around this and look at this as a project that is, 30 years in the making. I mean, I believe it's going to be beautiful and fantastic and really showcase Weaverville with this donation. And I'm looking forward to working with everyone. And I'll ditto just one thing that Emily said was the funds to do this. And this is worthwhile. And I think if you reach out to the Weaverville residents, they will also believe that this is the way to go, given a choice of 7-8 minutes to going up Elk Mountain Scenic Highway and hoping you get a parking place or not. This will really resolve a lot of problems that will take a lot of time and forethought, which I'm in it for the long run. And I'm really looking forward to working with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for those comments. And that's very generous of you to donate 40 acres of land. That doesn't happen a lot in Buncombe County.
I don't see anyone else waiting. I think we're done.
the next piece before we get into the projects is to talk about what happens after today. Kevin, are you in a position where you can speak to that, or would you like me to cover it?
Rachel, could you cover that? My connectivity is bare minimum right now, so I'm fading in and out.
We got you.
Appreciate it.
So today is September 17th, and during this passive recreation subcommittee meeting, we do anticipate that your group will vote on project recommendations, as well as discuss any use of potential remaining funds. After today, the next step is to bring these recommendations to the Board of Commissioners. There's a two-step process for making that happen. On October 1st, the commissioners will be having a briefing meeting, and our customary process is to brief them on items 2 weeks before those items come to them in their regular decision-making meetings. So the afternoon of October 1st, at a meeting that begins at 3 p.m., the board will be briefed about the funding process and recommendations that will be coming their way. And then on October 15th, the commissioners will hear a request for approval of those recommendations. And at that time, starting October 16th, staff will be ready to begin working with the grantees, the recipients of these funds, to put together the award agreements that will define the scopes of work and general terms and conditions and use of funds, as well as any special terms and conditions that you all put forward that are project specific. The presenters for those commission meetings, I reached out to your chair and vice chair in advance of today to explore their interest. As you know, Kevin Conricode is the chair of this subcommittee, and Matthew Fusco is the vice chair. They are available to cover these meetings. Matt would actually cover the October 1st meeting, and Kevin is available to attend and present on behalf of the subcommittee on the October 15th meeting. So unless there is any hesitation or concern with that plan on behalf of other members of the subcommittee, I will plan to coordinate with your chair and vice chair after today in preparation to bring that forward. We do invite other members of the subcommittee to be in attendance if you have a desire and availability to do so, but we wouldn't have any specific presentation asks of subcommittee members. And I see in the chat that Kevin is not, his connectivity today is not allowing for the meeting facilitation. So he's asking Bob Gale to make sure that we continue moving through the meeting today. So that is covering the review of selection process and update on presenters. Any questions or comments on those items?
That all sounds good to me, Rachel. Thank you.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Super.
Okay, so we have then the discussion of the projects for funding consideration. I guess I should have Rachel go ahead and lay out how this goes here.
Yep. So just quick verbal update, and then I'll pull up the spreadsheet. You all recall the process that we followed to get to here today, but a recap for anyone following along with the process. We began with our call for proposals and selected or received applications from our applicants back in the spring. I believe it was April. And this subcommittee has been working through its many steps of review and diligence over the past many months. There was a staff review and scoring of the projects. There were presentations to the subcommittee. There were site visits, and in many cases, there was follow-up questions and information received from the applicants. At your last meeting, we were able to make it through 7 of your 11 projects, and that is what's reflected in scenario 1. Another process step to remind you of is we did a sort of straw poll heading into last meeting to assess where the subcommittee was landing in terms of which projects you wanted to see funded. And all 11 projects had a majority of subcommittee members that wanted to either fully or partially fund the project. So all the projects have majority support for an award at some level. So we talked through Asheville Greenworks, Camp Greer, Haw Creek Community Association, Riverlink, Southern Appalachian Highland Conservancy, Town of Black Mountain, and Warren Wilson College at last month's regular meeting. I believe that was the 20th of August. The amounts that are reflected there are what there was actually an impromptu vote at the last meeting to record those initial amounts before coming back to the remainder. So the total that is reflected here is those amounts that have been filled in. There are a couple of amounts that are in that scenario that aren't green because they were filled in after the vote. So we'll need to come back to those. Today's plan is to talk one by one about the projects in yellow. Before we get there, staff wanted to revisit a couple of the ones in gray with a follow-up. So process-wise, what I'm proposing is we work on scenario 2 today and make any edits, changes, or additions and see by the end of the meeting what is ready for a vote of the subcommittee. Does that make sense and sound okay to everyone?
That sounds great, Rachel. Thank you. That sounds good.
Yes, sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds good.
So in the last 3 or 4 weeks since the last meeting, your staff, as you heard during introductions, which represents a lot of several different county departments that have a stake in this work, staff have been getting together and going through each of the projects at a very fine level to do essentially final vetting and uncover any questions or issues that might come up and be of importance before an award. The first one that we wanted to make you aware of is Camp Greer. I'm bringing forward on this one an update that does not affect the award amount. So you may recall that this is the Works Community Forest Trail Development Project. You may recall that we had received some follow-up information in advance of the last meeting that updated us about another award that they'd received for the same project, $200,000, which initiated from the state of North Carolina. It actually is funding that's flowing through county government to the project. And in their written materials, they requested to adjust some of the scope and budget within that $200,000 award in order to align it with their requested open space passive recreation award. The update is that staff is not comfortable trying to adjust the $200,000 state award because we've already locked that in a contract with the state of North Carolina between the state and the county. So when you all took your vote last meeting, we just wanted to make sure that there was no there was no impression given that we were also inviting them to change that previous award. And I know that's getting down into the details a little bit, but essentially what would happen is that we would be notifying them of this $675,000, which you'll recall was their $750,000 request minus the ineligible admin expense. So we would be notifying them of their $675,000 award if this gets approved, and essentially inviting them to adjust their budget one more time to make sure that it aligns with the state funding without changing the state funding. I feel like that was a little bit confusing, and I also knew that we wanted to make sure that we got that on the record because it's different than what they had said in their letter.
So I'm a little bit confused, yes. So when all is said and done, do I understand that there would be a chance for them to reduce, that the bond money could be reduced going through some other process to buy $200,000 since they don't need that much? Or am I I think I'm misunderstanding this.
Yeah, let me pull up their follow-up information from the last meeting. Maybe it was the one before. Here we go. We contacted them about the 200,000 and said, would you like to adjust your project now that you know about that extra 200,000? They did not make the choice to reduce their ask by 200,000. Instead, they shifted it for how they would use that funding differently for some enhanced and expanded parking and enhanced and expanded signage. And this was the follow-up information that had come. So in this, they actually tweaked what the $200,000 was to be used for. So this was the agreed upon state directed grant and then the amended state directed grant. The clarification here is that we don't have the authority to amend this because it's coming from another funding source. Our authority as this passive recreation land subcommittee pertains here to the 750,000. So that was their revised request, is for 750, but we have removed the admin costs because we found that those do not align with the grant guidelines, and that was how we landed at 675.
I see, that makes it clear. So yeah, all right, thank you. I understand now, I think.
So they'll have a use for the full funding. And,
yes.
And we are not going to do anything about another vote to reduce or change that previous vote for 675. You're just letting us know about some changes in the background.
Information only related to changes in the background. Good description.
Thank you
Gotcha.
for that. That sounds good.
We are asking you to reconsider an amount on Town of Black Mountain. During the last meeting, the subcommittee voted on full funding. Our staff discussions since the last meeting were identifying that the project budget includes a 35% contingency. Let me pull up the record. Here it is. Their construction contingency here is listed at 35% or $182,000. We've done some research and review of contingency, and general services here at Buncombe County uses a standard 10% construction contingency. And that is consistent with what we've seen in other projects within the passive recreation portfolio as well. We are advising that the subcommittee consider reducing the allowable contingency from 35% down to 10%. If we do so, we would start with this base of 521,892. We would apply the 10% to that of roughly 52,000, which would take us to a revised total. I can show you mathematically where that would land. So this is their base amount, 521,892.21. Oops. If I were to take that number and multiply it by 1.1, which is adding 10%. That looks funny, but it has given us the correct number, 574,081. And in their original proposal, they did round up to the nearest 1,000. So rounding up to the nearest 1,000 on that contingency would be 575. So that is the number that the staff are asking that the subcommittee consider when you vote to reaffirm your slate of recommendations later in this meeting.
I, having attended that site visit and talking with them and all, they did assure that they could do things in phases if they didn't get their full ask. So on the surface of it, what you just said, reducing it to that seems reasonable to me. I'd like to know what other subcommittee members say.
Rachel, can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
So when we're talking about the 10%, is the standard, a lot of the projects we're talking about are very like over, I mean, I'm trying to throw in the fact that working with the terrain that we have to deal with might have more than 10%, just because, I mean, a lot of this terrain's overgrown and maybe the what ifs are bigger. I'm kind of making sure I have devil's advocate in there, is that when the committee, when the Buncombe County, you guys looked at it, the staff looked at it, was there any consideration for the topography and how maybe difficult it would be to manage those sites? I didn't get to visit, so I don't know. Bob can speak to that more, I guess.
The sites were very level, very open, very level, not trees to be cut, more stuff. There had already been things built, sidewalks or things. It would be improvement of that sort of thing. I'm pretty right in remembering that, aren't I, Rachel?
Yes, and the things that can be unanticipated expenses that cause a project to draw on contingency are very often cost increases that can be associated with inflation or supply chain. I would ask if there's any staff that Tim or Robert that have more experience, or others with these construction projects that want to weigh in on this particular recommendation. Robert, I don't think you were in the room in that time, so I'm not. Only speak up to your level of comfort.
Oh, no, I'm here and I understand contingencies quite well. There are two different types. One is a design and engineer contingency, which is held in the design process. The other is contingency for the project and construction. What you're talking about with this 10% is appropriate relative to the type of project you're developing. In a standard capital project, that would actually be a 5% contingency. So what this is an enhanced standard capital project contingency, which covers some of those unforeseens as well as some of those inflationary impacts. And that's that, to me, that's an appropriate contingency. as it was stated before, was more than normal.
That answers my question. I mean, so do we need to make a motion on this, or something that we need to approve it?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, of course.
Does anybody know why they put in such a large contingency fee? Because I mean, it does sound out of the ordinary, and I just wonder if there's a reason for it.
This question didn't come up in the earlier review. So when we were going back and forth at presentation and site visit phase with questions, I don't recall a question being asked on this topic.
Okay. Well, I like the idea of reducing it to 10% if that's the normal county percentage that's kept back.
Thank you, Ann. Is that are you making a motion?
So in terms of process, you all could vote one by one. Another is to sort of settle at each one and then do a vote once we get to the sort of the slate or portfolio.
I got you. Like we're all in agreement, we're going to leave the number there, but then we're going to vote the entire thing as one.
That seems practical if the subcommittee is comfortable with it.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Can I interject one thing related to timing on this vote? Am I correct understanding, Kevin, you'll be leaving at 1 o'clock. Does that still give us a quorum? And it would be a shame to be without our chair or co-chair for this important vote. It's all coming down to this. So we still have all these projects to look at. Kevin, is there any possibility of you staying beyond 1 o'clock?
We may have already lost Kevin.
Do we still have a quorum, and can we still make a vote here today with the reigning?
We do still have a quorum. Mm-hmm. I did speak with Matt in advance and have his general support for the direction things were heading. Of course, he's not able to participate in the vote, not being here. Kevin and I also briefed ahead of the meeting. I can't speak to his individual sentiments on these specific projects, although we've heard from him in the previous meetings about all of them.
Yeah, I think I've got a pretty good idea where Matt stands on most of these projects. Where he would approve or not, and so I guess we just proceed and if we've got a quorum for a vote, try and do that.
Is there anyone that would like to have further conversation about the Ridgecrest connector adjustment before we leave that one? Bob, I think you were jumping in.
No, I was going to go ahead.
I was just
Bob Gale.
I think I was just trying to reiterate where it stood, what we just said. So
okay, perfect.
We will. I understand the intention to vote for things all in a kind of block, or however you phrase that, and so I'm okay with that. I just want to let you know that.
Okay, so let's do this. Bring forward Asheville Greenworks as voted last time. Bring forward Camp Greer's amount. Same with Haw Creek. Riverlink. Southern Appalachian. And Warren Wilson College. That brings the total allocated. That total is the same, so let me check it. It should be different than the column next to it. Yeah, that's right. To 3 million from these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 projects. So that means 4 to come back to. So there's 2 that had a penciled in amount. I say we start at the top and work our way down if that works for everyone. Balsam Gardens is probably the one that was the most settled. I have that document that I can show on the screen. 33 acres on Sand Hill Road. This is a privately owned property located in the city of Asheville, and the proposal was for Buncombe County to purchase and manage as a future greenway and/or park. Not currently under conservation, no current public access. It's in regulated floodplain and floodway. This property does align to county plans for Inca Heritage Trail connectivity. This project scored the highest of all of the staff reviewed projects. There were pricing questions from staff and from committee, both whether the application reflects the fair market value. They're originally requested 1.63 million, and whether that investment of 1.6 plus million would be a good value investment for this amount of property. At the last meeting, the committee agreed on a placeholder of $990,000 based on reducing the amount per acre to 30,000. This original request was about 50,000. So the math on this is 30,000 times 33. That's how we landed on 990,000. The staff discussion since the last meeting on this item, a couple of points. One, just one behind the scenes clarification that the county would need to follow its own funding guidelines that we're asking of others. And we would need to deed restrict this property upon acquisition to ensure that perpetual public access. And additionally, we would incur costs and need some funds for appraisal, due diligence, legal and professional fees, closing costs, etc. And so staff would recommend adding a placeholder of $100,000 for these costs. So again, to clarify, the committee had put in 990,000 as the caveat that it's going to depend on appraisal and fair market value. I see this as a not to exceed amount. So if it appraises at anywhere less than that, we would move forward with the purchase. And if the subcommittee is comfortable with it, our recommendation would be adding 100,000 to that amount so that there is sufficient budget for all of those extraneous costs that would be incurred.
Rachel, can I ask two clarifying questions?
Yeah.
It's the same question twice. What is if it appraises under that value, and what if it appraises over that value? And I guess that's some of the things I wrestle with, because when you give money to Buncombe County, well, then you guys use it where you need it. But as a committee member, we can't come back and nickel and dime. So I'm trying to figure out what if it appraises for $50,000 a square, an acre, and we only have a $1 billion dollars allocated. What happens then?
If it appraises for less
right
than what we have, those funds would not get used for this project. So they would roll back into being available within open space bond funds allowable per the voter approved referendum for bond funds.
Okay.
If it appraises for more, we would need consent from the committee to move forward. Because there were two reasons that the subcommittee limited it. Part of it was we don't really know what the property will appraise for, but part of it was that's a very high cost, and we wonder if the value is worth it. So if it really did appraise for 50,000 per acre, I'm not sure that staff has the sort of the mandate from this group to spend at that level.
Do we have any idea whether the current property owner would consider 30,000 an acre? Has anybody spoken to that owner to see if?
We have kept them posted about the process, but not done any real estate negotiation of that type.
Have not heard any comments from that person related to, we will pay you what it appraises for, like that would he be agreeable to that or not?
There are some legal limitations on what the county can pay for property based on appraised value. Amy or Tim, do you feel comfortable speaking to that in the moment?
It's a fairly straightforward calculation. I just don't know what it is. I've seen senior legal staff do it, so I can get back to you on that. But there's not a whole lot of negotiation where that's concerned once there's an accepted appraisal.
Well, I suppose then that we could, if we chose, approve this higher budget to cover some of those costs, surveys and what have you. And then if the appraisal comes in too low and the owner does not want to sell, there'll be $1 million put back into this general pot, I suppose, I think there'll be other monies in that pot as well after we're done here today. Does that sound like a scenario that could happen?
I agree with the second part of your sentence. It's looking like we're likely to have a balance. We can reconvene the committee to make additional decisions. If the subcommittee is comfortable with a higher amount, if that feels restrictive to limit it to 30,000 per acre, you could increase that. But we're dealing with the lack of information at this time on how things are going to play out.
Rachel, let me ask another question to help with that. Since we're budgeting $100,000 in administrative fees, right? We have to get it appraised. So if we approve the $1 million, that will allow them to. We will be able to get the appraised to get more information. Am I reading you correctly?
Yes, the real estate process would have some upfront costs, even if the closing doesn't occur.
I'm actually I'm good with budgeting, that the $1.9 million to make sure that we can move forward because it gets the questions answered, I guess.
Additional discussion on this one.
Other committee members? Okay, I'll say that, that I think that amount would be needed. Rachel, you've laid that out. I understand all of that. And I'd be supportive in raising that to that amount, and note that it would still be significantly less than the 1,633,400 originally asked.
Can I make a comment here?
Go ahead, Ann.
Oh, I was just going to say it. The 30,000 an acre to me seems like a reasonable amount, and if it appraises for more, it's possible that we could ask the landowner to donate the rest of it and get some kind of tax advantage in that.
That seems like it could be a feasible part of a negotiation process.
Yeah, and I talked with Matt too about this number, and I think several of us on this committee would agree that, in a floodplain, when you don't have a lot of opportunity for other development, 30,000 is a pretty good number. Yeah. And so I too would be comfortable with leaving it at the 1.9 million and moving forward with it. So.
We had a staff member with a hand up.
Yeah, it was me, Jennifer Harrison. I guess the question I have for the committee is, do you support the project moving forward? And Rachel, if they vote on a budget and it goes over that, will the committee have to come back? I guess I'm wondering, is there a possibility, knowing that we can only negotiate the sale price based on what the county, how the county determines value, is it safe to have the higher budget in case it goes over, and knowing well that it won't be spent if it comes under, rather than reconvening to revote if you want to support this project moving forward?
That's certainly a possibility. What I've heard from the subcommittee is that price doesn't seem reasonable. And so there might not be appetite for that amount of expense for that size parcel.
Yeah, and I guess that's my question. Is there appetite for it if it comes in higher?
I can say, Jennifer, that for me, I know that was the big drawback, is that it's 33 acres in a floodplain. Is that what's I mean, is because we have so many projects to fund. I think for me, it was the same way, that that's too high a price for that property. And I guess I hear the other subcommittee said the same things, like, no, we wouldn't want to spend $1.6 million on something that can't be developed, a lot, I guess. I don't know. Bob can answer.
Yeah, to that end, and your question, Allison, I mean, if it's a matter of would we be willing to meet again to vote on something given new information, I'm totally open to doing that if that happens. But I go with what David just said. We all felt like that was too high, and I think adding the 100,000 to this is something that that's what I'd be for right now, as opposed to increasing it.
Okay. We've got 3 projects and a little over half an hour. Final hands up before we move to the Woodman Trailhead project. Okay, so this project came to us from friends and neighbors of Swannanoa. You'll recall this was initially proposed for Buncombe County to purchase and manage a 3 to 5 acre property for public access for the development of an educational park with connectivity, because this site is located along the planned future route of the Fonta Flora State Trail. It's located in unincorporated Buncombe County, also in floodplain and floodway. The original proposal came to us with 3 tiers, with an acquisition tier and then a tier for improvements to install the park, as well as a tier for connectivity to install improvements along the corridor, like a bridge. The Woodman buyer, the major change to this project since originally proposed is that the parcel was purchased by someone else. And the buyer has already closed on that property. That buyer did express interest and willingness to participate in future conversations about feasibility and details of a proposed greenway, but nothing firm. There was a parcel across the river that was originally mentioned in their initial proposal, and that was a 2.3 acre property referred to as the Stewart property for 60,000. However, later on 8/18, when we got a follow-up from the friends and neighbors of Swannanoa, the fans update from August 18th talked about that was the one that had the 2 options on it. I could pull that up. It was in this packet. So we looked at it during our last meeting, and they showed these 2 possible concept options. So this option here, which is on the south side of the river, does include that Stewart property. At this time, it's being referred to as a 4 acre direct purchase, along with those 3 potential easements to come up with a set of acquisitions that would be 504,000. And then they had, oops, that was up. Okay, so option 1 is the south side. Option 2 is the north side. And the 2 prices were included in that document as well. Estimates for the the Stewart property coming in at 400,000 now, and the total acquisitions being either 504 or 544. Another follow-up piece of information that had come our way, let's see if I can point to it quickly. A letter was received in advance of this meeting with request to send it to the subcommittee, and we included it in your packet, essentially asking for flexibility. Would the subcommittee be able to allocate an amount, and then if they don't need it, that full amount, be able to keep the funds within the project for any future expenses that might be aligned with the spirit and intent of the original award. Our staff discussion since the last meeting, in particular related to this, is that doesn't align with the way our grant funding needs to be specific. Our need is to limit the funds to the scope and budget as proposed. In addition, we've had conversations about the Greenway development process and the process for purchasing lands and specifically purchasing easements. And we've learned that or come to understand that it's not feasible to purchase easements for potential future greenways. The proper sequencing is actually much later in the design process. Someone referred to 90% or more designed, because at that time we would have sufficient data for surveying and recording the exact specifications for an easement. All of this is to say that at this time, because so much has changed since the original proposal and because so much is unknown at this time, staff is advising that the subcommittee consider not including funding for this project. One option might be to set aside time to reconvene to see if the county can support the applicant in moving along, additional time like for the feasibility study to be funded so that the project can be at a place of more certainty. But as it stands today, staff sees a lot of risk with the project, which calls into the question of the appropriateness of using bond funds for this project at this time. It was the fourth highest rated project within the staff reviews, and we heard from some subcommittee members a lot of support for the project, particularly its potential to deliver connectivity and its equity and community access components. It's clear that there's a lot of support for the project, and staff is saying that at this time, there's a concern about risk related to readiness, given how much has changed since the proposal and how many unknowns we're looking at related to this project. Thoughts or responses from subcommittee on that?
Go ahead, Bob. You first.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Robert. Go ahead, Bob.
Well, thank you, Bob. I appreciate the input from staff on this, and I agree. I think we've got a lot of balls up in the air here, and I don't think it'd be wise to allocate public money right now at this point until we have more answers. I myself am not opposed to meeting again to set another meeting up in a couple months, 3 months, whatever, to discuss any other funds that may be available and revisit this project. I personally have no problem approving the others and putting this one on a side burner for now. That's my opinion, and I appreciate staff's input for sure on this. Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if we don't vote to fund any of this, does that mean that the potential that we lose that connectivity in the future? I mean, could it go to some other development so that becomes unusable for the Fontaflora Trail? I would just hate to see us lose an opportunity to purchase or purchase easement or purchase the property to include in the Fonda Flora Trail. I just don't want to lose that now if it's possible to buy it without a lot of complications.
Staff has offered to work closely with this group of applicants, with fans, to learn more and provide our expertise in the development of the project. At this time, we've been fairly constrained in how much we can collaborate because of the competitive application process that was open. But we would like to sit down with our staff and their group and dig into which components of the project are there pieces that are more urgent? Are there pieces that are more simple? At this point, it feels like we just don't have the full information about readiness to approve it as currently configured.
So a couple comments I'll add. Yes, that's a concern of mine also about, losing land. It might be sold to somebody else. If that's why that's what a lot of our discussions have been about too. Acquisition is highly important, but it was a very complicated proposal, and good people behind it, good, well-meaning, and but there weren't enough questions ironed out. So I support the concept that Rachel has outlined, that the staff concerns and all. My question is, you mentioned something, Rachel, about setting aside some funds, possibly for, I don't know, next year or whenever things become more clear. So if we were to set aside funds that right now are being asked for, or maybe we threw out some last meeting, we wouldn't be harming other projects, but would that money be available? Would it be kind of protected because we ask that it be set aside till you get more of these questions ironed out? Or could it be just done away with somehow?
The idea is that the subcommittee will vote on which projects are ready to move forward for that October 1st and 15th vote by commissioners. We do expect a remaining balance regardless of the choice you make about this project. So the recommendation to commissioners could also include a recommendation about that remaining balance to hold it back for passive recreation projects that need additional diligence. And depending on the amount, another option the subcommittee might want to consider is opening up another cycle for additional requests. We don't see the bottom line on the page yet because we haven't made it all the way down. So it's hard to know what the dollar amount is. I think somebody had said during a previous meeting, depending on the dollar amount, it might or might not be like worth it to do an open cycle. All of that is to say, I could envision the request for board action being, please approve these projects at these amounts. Please hold these remaining funds back for reconsideration in 2025 for passive recreation subcommittee additional recommendations.
I think that's reasonable.
I think it's at least, David, do you want to go ahead first? Go ahead.
No, Robert, go ahead, Alfred. I'll tag him when you're done.
I think personally that it's reasonable to put this forward with the request to the county commissioners that and notify the fans that we like this project, and we would hope that they could hold some of the remaining funds for this project till it's further evaluated. And the rest of it, I think one of Matt Fusco's concerns was whatever we don't spend, the county's going to spend, and I don't know that I agree, Rich. I don't know that's going to be worthwhile for us. We'll see what the numbers left for us to go through another round of applications. But I think it's certainly reasonable to put this forward in the committee. The county commissioners will listen to say, okay, we've got a couple million, whatever's left, but we've already earmarked, the subcommittee's already earmarked this 500,000, whatever that number is. And so I think it's reasonable to ask them to hold that until, some of these gray areas are cleared.
Yeah, what I was going to
Go
add,
ahead.
Rachel, you mentioned that when this, we're done appropriating the money or whatever we're going to appropriate today, that you have been that you guys could then be in contact with the fans because there's no longer any competition. Excuse me. But if there's money left over and we decide to have a reopen cycle, would that be a conflict of interest then because you'd then be working with them? And I'm in agreement with Ann. I like the project. There's just so many question marks. I don't want to lose. I mean, it's kind of like if we don't approve it and they go spend it somewhere else, I'd rather just. I'm not saying I want to waste money, but I'd rather just waste money and buy the property with the guarantee that we have the property, as opposed to the what ifs. But I know there's a lot of questions there. But I don't know.
Yeah, I appreciate your question, and maybe I should have thought that comment through before making it. This isn't a typical grant process as we often see, because like in this example and in Balsam Gardens as well, the applicant is actually asking for the county to acquire land. So it's I think we would need procurement and legal guidance on how to proceed. What I have heard in preparing for this meeting with the staff team and with Tim, Assistant County Manager, who's on the screen with us, is the county's commitment to meet with and to collaborate with the applicants that might have a project that needs further needs to evolve further in order to minimize those risks that currently exist.
I mean, I guess my best way to say it is I would like to do what Bob Turner said, which is to earmark $1.6 million to be held aside and see if the fans can I'm happy to come back on and approve, the money officially, but I just don't want I don't want to approve the money till we get a clearer plan. But I think the outline of the plan is excellent. And I think we're all in agreement. We want to see it move forward. It's just not further along now. I hear you're saying too, the risk is too great because it's not far enough along yet. But we want to see the plan go forward. They just need assistance in making it go farther, I guess.
Yeah, I'd support that too. I think David, you meant 544,500 rather than 1.6, correct, Rachel?
It's all TBD. There's a range of numbers at play here. Let's just have a 0 for now, unless anyone is proposing to try to approve it today with the holdback funds, and then see what our available funds land at. Is that okay?
I'm good with that.
Sure.
We have 2 other projects, and this next one is complex as well. I'm going to take a liberty and do the one that's less complex because I think it can be quicker, which is the Town of Woodfin Riverside Park improvement. You'll recall there was an additional site visit opportunity on this project. So once I'm done running through, if Anne would like to add anything, I'll pass to you. But quick recap and overview as we've done for every project. Oops, I keep clicking on the wrong PDF. Here it is. Riverside Park with Town of Weaverville. This originally came at a higher amount at 3.368. The town contacted us in writing at one point during the summer. I think it was around the time of the presentation to your subcommittee because they mentioned it at that time. They had reduced their ask to $3,012,000. This is a municipal-owned park improvement project. It's part of that larger development project, Woodland Greenway and Blueway. And the funding request here is specifically for improvements within the existing Riverside Park, not that expansion area, but the existing Riverside Park, plus the installation of a passive river user / aquatic life channel, bypassing Taylor's Wave, which is the active whitewater feature that's part of the Blueway. So last week we reviewed options within the budget, not last week, last meeting, last month. Staff discussions since that time have focused on one particular item in specific. The town made us aware that their request includes an $817,000, the exact number is 817,429, an $817,000 and change line item that the town has budgeted from its fund balance already and contracted. So in order to keep the project on track with timing and permitting, they needed to go into contract and hadn't fundraised that amount needed. So they appropriated fund balance in order to keep it on track. In doing so, they essentially created a financial obligation of the town for that funding. They were hoping to replace this with bond funds. However, the application guidelines are clear. Staff has done another review of those application guidelines, and it states that outstanding financial obligations are disallowable. So on this particular project, depending on what the subcommittee's appetite is for the rest of the funding request, our recommendation would be to back out or subtract this 817,429 amount that is disallowable and cap the award not to exceed $2,195,231. And incidentally, that amount that they had allocated, the 817 and paid for with fund balance, or encumbered, I guess, with fund balance, is roughly equivalent to the cost of that bypass channel for passive river or aquatic life bypass. So the net effect would be an investment of these funds to essentially cover the improvements in that existing park, which was bathrooms and signage and trails along the future location of the wood, I don't remember the name of the greenway, but part of that larger project of the Woodfin Greenway Blueway. Anne, anything to add?
Oh, thank you, Rachel. I would like to make a few comments. I had the opportunity to visit the park last week with staff from Woodfin, along with Rachel, and I came home and I made a few notes. So if you allow me just a couple of minutes just to give you my thoughts on what I saw. First of all, and I was thinking in terms of 3 million and not 2 million, but it is a big ask, but I really feel like it is going to have a huge passive recreational impact on the county. I think people from all over the county will be coming to use it. It's very accessible. It's on the river. There's plenty of parking, and it's a very unusual but very I think positive park experience. Another thing that occurred to me is that we had talked earlier when we were looking at our criteria about leveraging funds, and this money, the original 3 million or 3.4, is being as an addition to what would be, I get the whole project is $34 million. So this is less than 10% of the project. So there's a good leverage with this amount of money. I think that I know you're saying that the bypass would not be funded basically if you took out the 800,000, but when you think about it, it is it is passive recreation because it's not the active part of the wave. It's the part where people that are floating down the river can get around the wave and the fish can get back up, which is good for environmental. There is a greenway component to it, developing the greenway in the old part of the park. But I think, Rachel, that it also includes paving the greenway in the expansion part. I may be wrong on that.
It does include the greenway that passes through that portion of the park, as well as some additional, I guess, bypass trail would be appropriate term.
Yeah. So, and I think permitting, permits that are going to expire if they don't do it is an issue for them. So, and when you were talking about holding back that money that they have allocated from the funds of the town, I wonder, and this is on my part here saying, could we add that 300,000 back that they had taken out? Is that a possibility? I would just love it. I think it's such a fabulous project, and it's going to involve, it's going to have such a huge impact on recreation in Buncombe County that to me, it just, it warrants as much funding as we can afford at this point to give it.
Rachel, would you clarify? So they're in contract with something, and that's why the 800,000 doesn't work legally or something.
Yeah, we've been looking at the item for a month or so to just make sure we were absolutely correct on this. And we put the question forward to the town, confirming it's to replace funding that the town budgeted from its fund balance. And they shared that specific number with us. In the original application, there were various options. When the town of Woodfin reduced their funding request to the county previously, it was about removing an extra put-in. So they actually had cut 356,000 from the project. I think at that time their rationale was they're still trying to fundraise for the most critical elements, and so scaling the project back to its core. There are other put-ins, and they felt like the project could move forward without it. So that was how we got to the modified amount of 303,012,000. It's stated simply, they've applied for, they've applied for funds for something that the grant guidelines say is unallowable, and staff doesn't see a way that we can fund that.
Okay, so what they contracted to do that's unallowable, that wasn't the bypass, right?
It was, I think.
Oh, it was. Oh, okay. All right. Never mind. Then that answers my question.
Yeah, if you were to stop by the site now, there's a lot of really cool construction underway. And Anne might remember the more technical terms of what's happening, but they're constructing they're using a certain type of dam to create a dry area.
Dam.
Thank you.
The coffer
Yes.
dam.
Right.
To construct the active Taylor's wave, and then that will somehow get flipped. And so they're already in contract for the work that will construct the passive bypass.
I understand. I was wondering if it was something else they had contracted with that didn't have anything to do with the bypass. Why couldn't we still leave the 800,000 in for that? But I see it is that. So never mind. Okay.
Best I understand it.
Well, I agree with everything Ann said, and I certainly would like to give them as much money as we can, but legally we can't. Obviously, it sounds like what you said, that has to be taken out. So it's not like we have a say in that.
And it looks like they're still gonna get the wave. They're still gonna get that bypass.
Oh, yeah.
So I appreciate staff's input here again. I think
Yeah.
I'm in favor of the way it's working out here
Yeah,
myself.
essentially what they have communicated is that not having that extra money in their fund balance creates a hardship for the town because it's a small town budget and a small overall fund balance. And having cash flow is important because a lot of their projects are reimbursement based. And while it does create hardship, what we didn't hear is that it will stop the project from proceeding.
Right.
Yeah, I also was impressed by their willingness to take that money out of the town operating fund. Their whole budget is $7 million, and they took out almost $1 million to borrow for this project. That's how committed they are to this, which is pretty impressive for a small town with a pretty small tax base.
Hey, Rachel, just clarification here. I'm with Bob here too. And we're sure that all the 817,000, I guess that's, I just want to make sure we offer what we can. Like, did all that money go to one thing? Because if it didn't all go to, let's say, fund the wave, well, then we should be able to still leave money back. I mean, it seems like
essentially they've already entered into a contract.
Right.
North Carolina law requires this thing called pre-audit, so we're not allowed to contract for something unless we have the money to cover that liability. So they put up money to cover that liability, and in making that choice to do so, they essentially made it ineligible for this funding source. Hopefully, there's other funding sources that can replenish that obligation.
Yeah, when I worked in schools, it was the same way. You couldn't, if you purchased something without prior approval, you were just out the money. In essence, what you're saying, we can't fund something that they approved with a different set of money because they decided to do that. We legally can't. We want to, but we can't because it's against the law.
Right. So we are at the point of we could approve 2,195, 231. Is that correct, Rachel?
That's the amount that remains after we back out the 817.
Well, I guess go ahead.
I want to inject something real quick. We got a couple of minutes left, 3 minutes. I am willing to stay on board if the other committee members can stick around till 2 or whatever it takes. We've got another big project ahead of us.
I can
David,
too.
are you good? Ann, are you okay to stick around?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I can stay around if you need to.
I actually have to leave. I have a meeting right after this, so I apologize.
Lena, do you want to weigh in on anything that's been discussed so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think I like the direction that all of this is going. And so, I would be interested to see what is left over after the fact and what we may be able to fund later. But yeah, I mean, so far I'm in agreement with all of the changes, especially some of the new considerations that have come up with contingencies and with some of the funding structure changes. So all good here.
Before you go, Lena, because we do have a couple minutes, Angelin or Amy, could you quickly check the bylaws and see if quorum is simple majority? If so, 4 can make the vote. If quorum is 5, there might be a reason to quickly get whatever vote we have a majority on right now. I apologize for cutting someone off with that.
That's a good point. I had the same thought, Rachel.
While we're waiting on that, Lena, do you have 10 or 15 more minutes or is this a hard stop for you at one?
Yeah, it's a hard stop for me. I've got a pretty big meeting right after this, and I'm helping to lead it. So unfortunately, I do have to leave right at 1:30.
Okay.
Coming up momentarily.
Rachel, this is Angeline. The bylaws say that a quorum is a simple majority.
Okay, great. Then back to you, Bob. Gail.
Okay, then do we need to have a motion? Well, we don't need to have the motion to approve what we've just talked about. We're ready to move on to the, are there any more questions about this project first? Okay, are we ready to move on to the town of Weaverville?
Yes, and Lena, should we ask, Lena, are you in favor of everything we discussed so far, approving, just so your voice is heard?
I am.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Okay. All right, Rachel.
It looks like Amy Broughton, attorney, is hoping to jump in.
Hey guys,
Okay.
thank you. Sorry, I was looking for a raise your hand emoji, but I couldn't find one, so I just used my real hand. Okay, so I've been doing some research while you guys have been talking, and there's really no hard number I can give you. So most landowners are entitled to fair market value for their property. Then the question becomes, well, what's fair market value? In general, that would be, you know, we want it to be the assessed tax value, but a lot of times that's low. So we would probably end up just negotiating, because in short, fair market value is whatever the market will bear. You know, so if they would think, you know, and I think it would just come down to a negotiation. We can pay a little bit over fair market value if we really, really needed it, because that's one of the factors that we can take into consideration. You know, another thing you could consider is depending on the use of the land and how much foot traffic and bicycle traffic and, you know, whatever you expect. We could also consider asking landowners if we could put a easement on their property. And an easement is valued at 80% of assessed value. So you do have some options depending on how the land will be used, whether or not you really want to own it, and things like that. But when you're thinking property, think fair market value. That's kind of just a good rule of thumb.
Thank you.
Which tells you precisely nothing, since you don't know what they're asking for it, but we'd have to get, you know, have it evaluated and appraised and all that.
So Amy, is there a fair market value norm or average, say in Buncombe County, for lands that are in a floodplain?
Well, that's an interesting question, because if it's in the floodplain, and I'm dealing with this with Jennifer Harrison, I'm not sure if she's still on here.
I am.
You can't really sell that land, can you? I mean, a landowner really could not expect to get a whole lot for it.
That's my point.
Well, okay. We like to say you can't build in the floodplain, but that is not necessarily a correct statement. You have to build with modification in the floodplain. So you'd have to elevate beyond flood level. Obviously getting septic, if you're not on sewer, could be a challenge, getting that permitted. But it is not without value for sure. And depending on the use, that could create a value. And then I just wanted to also say to Amy's comment about easement, that's not necessarily a conservation easement. That's a right-of-way easement, correct? It could be an agreement to use, not necessarily put a full conservation easement on the property.
Right, that's correct. It's just that using that 80% of assessed value is also a good rule of thumb. So I'm looking at some law right now that market value is the price estimated in terms of money at which the property would change hands between a willing and financially able buyer and a willing seller. So again, it's really what the market will bear. And you know, the property in Buncombe County, I just bought some in McDowell County, and it's so much cheaper in McDowell County than it is here. So, you know, so many things are location dependent.
Mm-hmm.
So that tells you almost nothing, but unfortunately, that's what you got to deal with. You're going to have to negotiate.
Yeah, I think we as a committee were pretty comfortable with that $30,000 number. Is that right? I think we all kind of voiced that. I think I know.
Yeah,
I still
am. I still am after hearing what Amy said. I appreciate all that Amy gave us, though. It's helpful to know that.
All right. Let's move to Weaverville watershed. I'm going to recap the project as I have others, and then try to bring us up to speed on the latest. So this is a municipal-owned 309-acre property that is already in conservation. We have a copy of that easement. That's the majority of it. I forget the exact number of acres that's in that conservation easement. It's not located in the town of Weaverville. It's located in unincorporated Buncombe, in steep slope protected ridge area. It was the second lowest scoring project from the staff evaluation, specifically showing some notes about lack of design and construction ready documentation, as well as funding leverage, showing only these funds supporting the project. There were other comments around bringing recreation opportunities into an area that would benefit the county. The original application had included a small 14 to 18 space parking lot along Elk Mountain. At that time of the original application, there had not been public engagement that had been implemented or planned. We've had a number of follow-up opportunities with this applicant, as we have all other, a few extras in this instance because of its complexity. As a result of some of the feedback that has been coming, you heard public comment even during today's meeting, and you've received in your packet many dozens of pages of comment that have come in. Parking has been one of the topics. In the August 4th follow-up, the towns shared some information about the possibility of moving their 5 to 10 car parking area, and by the 12th of August came in with a note about proposing 2 separate parking areas on the site, and that was the time, if you'll recall, they adjusted again their financial ask. It had initially come in just north, I think, of $1 million. They dropped it by as a result of having included some unallowable maintenance, and then asked at that time for it to go back up to 952,000, which I think is the figure that we've got in the sheet at this time as their funding request, 952. At that same time, on the 12th of August is when they had notified us about withdrawing their application to the Tourism and Development Authority for grant funds to support the project. We received another follow-up from them that is in your packet for today's meeting that came in on the 9th of September, committing to some public input sessions. So responding to the concern there, also committing to traffic study and engineering designs. It's referring at this time to initial parking area further east. I think that was closer to the proximity of the Buzzards Rock end of that property, or that direction on Elk Mountain Scenic Highway. The most recent letter as well shared a commitment to exploring a couple of other items that have surfaced, like a land donation that was mentioned earlier in the call today. The town has said that they're committed to exploring that and how it might potentially be folded into or impact the project, as well as exploring another request that has been expressed, which is a request for buffer. I think it was buffer from road and or buffer from other adjacent property. And they made a commitment to the town absorbing the costs for these studies and designs. And that responded to a concern that had been voiced in a previous meeting. As staff has reviewed all of this information in preparation for today's meeting, we have landed in a similar place as we did with the Woodman Trailhead project. So at this time, because so much has changed since the initial proposal, and so much is unknown related to the project at this time. Staff is advising the subcommittee to consider not funding this project at this time. Of concern, having no formal commitment of funds from town council does put the project at greater risk, which calls into the question the appropriateness of a bond funding allocation at this time. So again, if we were to hold funds as a passive recreation subcommittee, there would be an opportunity to revisit a future award. We have heard a strong level of support from members of the subcommittee for this project. Those comments are in the back of your score sheet. For an example, from a member of the subcommittee expressing being in favor of this project in every way, and also still having some major concerns. And that reflects a similar sentiment that staff is bringing forward, where we do think that there's an opportunity for Buncombe County staff to work closely with the town of Weaverville as some of this project can move forward and get closer to readiness, and be a viable project to deliver on what we're looking for with passive recreation investments later, but at this time not seeing the readiness.
So what funds, this is Bob Turner again, what funds are we looking for commitment from town council? What was that amount? Can you review that again real quick? How much was that?
There's some estimated amounts. So the project at this time has not had any formal engineering or design. In their follow-up for today, they estimated a $10,000 or $15,000 cost for a traffic study and an incidental cost for facilitated input sessions. It seems to me that more engineering design is needed than only a traffic study for the design of the parking. And other costs, depending on what decision is made for location of that parking area and acceptance of the land donation. Just as we had indicated a survey appraisal closing costs on a real estate transaction previously, if they are to go to a closing on additional land, that might have some costs. So I don't know that I could easily estimate that total. At this time, they're saying it's 15,000, up to 15,000 plus another up to 1,500.
And I guess we should keep in mind, this land is not going anywhere. It's already locked in.
It's owned by the town
Right,
and under
right.
conservation easement.
Right. So this project would not disappear if we did not act.
Right.
I think we all like the project a lot, and we'd like to see it move forward, the trail systems and all that. The downside of holding this, again, as we talked about before, it's within the county commissioners, rights to use this money elsewhere, and that may put this project on the back burner, or it might not be feasible to fund it at some point in the future. So
I'll just show you for the explanation or demonstration purposes, if the subcommittee chose to make the same choice here and hold back funds, the total amount being held back is actually 4.1 million.
I think for me too, having said, I saw at the bottom, Rachel, is that knowing that we have funds left over, because we don't think at this time I'm more leaning towards, hey, let's do what we did with the Woodman Trail, get all these questions answered. I think everyone on the committee is willing to come back and in 2 months or 3 months time, or if you have to open up a whole nother round. I mean, I just don't know if there's enough money there to open up a whole nother round of you know, to get more projects in. But I just think these questions need to be answered. I'm willing, when the questions are answered, to meet again and grant the money then, because having $4 million gives me more like, hey, you know, if it was $200,000, it's not that much, but there's a large sum. It's more likely for us to be able to hold this aside to get these projects where they need to be so that we can then fund them at that time.
I agree. A couple thoughts going through my mind. First of all, there are some alternatives being offered, which are really very good. I looked at that buffer idea, and it although I feel like the 300 feet is, having worked with buffers and national forests and trails near properties and stuff like that, I used to go for the biggest, most buffer I could, but did learn that 150 feet is really good. And there are a lot of places along the Mountains to Sea Trail, the Park Service Parkway that go behind properties that are closer than that, but they're still pretty well screened. But 150 feet to me is very reasonable and effective. So even if the town didn't want to go to the whole 300, there is some. I think the homeowners would find that still a very good buffer. Anyway, I liked the buffer idea. I also liked the fact that there's a person offering to donate 40 acres of land in Buncombe County. That's incredible. It also shows how much they care. And where I'm leading with all this is that now that the public has finally been really brought in, and with that document that Rachel mentioned that they mailed recently, they've documented their commitment to engage with the public in a way they haven't before. And to me, that was one of the things that bothered me very much. And the idea is to cure this whole problem of the danger of the highway situation in the parking lot. So the fact if we set aside some money and wait for these questions to be answered, there are going to be meetings. The public is going to have a lot more chance to influence. It sounds like the town is finally starting to listen to them. And whatever comes out of that in a facilitated meetings might be a very good thing that everybody can live with. So time is on the side of getting the right decision, I believe, in a way that still the park can be done well. And finally, the last thing there is that in the end, the public will also have a chance to contact county commissioners if there's still a concern remaining. I feel like it's our duty to make sure that we're following the parameters that were set up for the public parks qualifications for the bond. And I think we've made our point. I certainly have on this whole traffic safety thing. And I think the town's listening more now, and the public should keep pressure on them. So I'm comfortable with setting aside money to hopefully get this park done in a good way. So I support that also. I was rambling. I said it in a long-winded way, but those are all my reasons.
I think what would make us comfortable too, since we're in favor of these projects, we've just got the language for holdback funds. And maybe what communication we give to the commissioners is, these projects, if we say approved, but we could say, approved on concept, hold funds till clarification on details, or something that tells the commissioners that we can talk about this language if you all agree. But I think we need to communicate to the commissioners that we like these projects, and to the applicants that we like these projects a lot. We just got to do a little more due diligence. Hold back funds for future due diligence or something, or however you want to word that. But I think rather than just saying hold back funds, that we need to make sure that the county commissioners understand that these projects are valuable. We like them a lot. There's just needs a little more.
I was going to say, Robert, in conjunction with you, like for the town of Weaverville, might say hold back funds for communication with community or the public, and feasibility of the parking. The parking is the issue. I don't think the landowners, what I gather, are totally against the park. They don't want to, where the parking lot is proposed is not safe. Having grown up in Asheville and been on that road as a teenager, I know quite well how curvy it is up there. It used to be a dirt road when I was up there, though. But it just seems that we need to engage community and find out what's most feasible. And also, the entire time, I'll be honest with you, I've been wondering how Weaverville would access it, because my brain is just go down Kimberly Avenue and then you go up Elk Mountain Scenic Highway, and that's from the town of Asheville. But it seems like we need to put that language in there. We're in favor of the project, just not how it's written. There needs to be more studies. We need more, with these proposals, so that we can then grant the money.
David, can I make a comment to that your access? I went up to Upper Heron Cove Road yesterday, which is the area that I believe that this very generous woman would, her 40 acres is located off of Heron Cove Road. Is that correct, Rachel?
I believe that's the vicinity.
Well, Upper Heron Cove Road goes between Elk Mountain Scenic Highway and Weaverville, and I think goes maybe down to near Eller Cove. So the access, if that 40 acres is accepted by the town of Weaverville, there's a good chance that not only could it provide parking and access to the 300 acres, but also it would be much more accessible to people in the town of Weaverville. So, it's still a great project, and there's some possible modifications with this donation that would make it that much more appealing. So I would say I agree with setting aside the funds, but I think we need to let the county commissioners know that we really support the project, and it's a great project for North Buncombe County.
Timothy Love has his hand up and has for some time here.
Bob, you can call me Tim.
Okay. I only see your name up there.
You're good. You're good. I haven't been participating with y'all in the past, and I really appreciate the discussion today. I think y'all are approaching this from a very objective, measured perspective. What I wanted to add to the discussion is, questions like what Ann and Dave Burdett just brought up are really important, and those are the types of answers we would expect to come from a design and engineering process to figure out, where parking is, what's the grade, looking at the site layout. Like, those are really detailed questions. And so what I want to say, and you probably know this, but it needs to be said out loud, the process to get to those designs may not be something that happens quickly, over the next few weeks, for instance. In my mind, and this relates to other projects that need design as well, not just the town of Weaverville. So I want to be balanced in that. This could be a 6 to 9 month process that these folks are going through at minimum. And, I would expect in some of these processes, in particular, those that have draw public concern, that you'd have a pretty structured rollout of public engagement. This is typical for greenway projects where you have, review of the alignment, questions about the alignment, things of that nature. So I just want to make sure we're level setting with the committee that additional due diligence may not be quick, maybe a longer process, 9 months, 12 months, potentially, who knows? And, may also require a pretty substantial amount of funding. The design of a project, there's different ways to estimate that. 10 to 20% of total project cost is one way of doing it. So these are not inconsequential design funds that will need to be spent. So I'll pause there on that topic. One other item I do wanted to bring up, David Burdett, you mentioned, whether or not the juice would be worth the squeeze for applicants if there's a $4 million application pot. And I think that's something for y'all to think about in terms of your recommendations. As I look at what you're proposing right now, I'd have to say that there's probably good consideration there. A lot of your projects fall under $500,000. There's many other projects that might find value if there was a different application cycle. I'm not advocating for that. I just want y'all to consider it as you make your recommendations, so that we can make sure these funds get the best use, the broadest use across Buncombe County. So, thank y'all.
Tim, thanks for your input there. That brings up another point. Would it make sense for some of these projects we're talking about right now, the proof on concept, to allocate some funds to perform some of these studies that are needed? Will these projects be able to fund 10% or whatever that number is to get to the next stage of the project?
Unfortunately, the application process was designed in that to make design and engineering costs disallowable.
Right,
I think that the assumption was that there would be projects at that level of readiness.
Right.
So we have had to back those expenses out of anything that's funded by this grant cycle.
And Tim, I do, you made a good point, and I've never, having been through stuff like this for so much in the past, I've never assumed that some of these things would move ahead as fast as like in a few weeks or few months. The main thing we have to do is the schedule we've been given is to approve funding. And that's what's we are faced with, making these decisions quickly now. Well, we've been doing it for months, but now's the time. So, but the projects themselves, I fully expect I wouldn't expect the park to be ready, for instance, in a year, but maybe it would be, I don't know. But so anyway, you made a good point. The projects go on a long time, but it's our approving the funding is what has to happen now.
Yeah, and we will work with each awarded project to define the activities in scope and timeline and deliverables with milestones and all of those pieces that will go into the award document.
Can I make one comment here? And I appreciate Tim Love's comments on how this gets done and the complexities of it. I'm wondering if when either Matt or Kevin goes and makes their presentation to the county commissioners, if they can make those points that we really do support these projects, but have these questions that need to be answered, and that we'd very much like to hold back some of this money for future allocations, but also that we know that there are a lot of really good projects, and that we would, as Tim suggested, maybe have more opportunity for applications. But certainly with the ones that we've talked about, we need to emphasize to county commissioners that we want to hold back some of these funds. And if I can go back just a second to the Friends of Swannanoa, the funds that we want to hold back there, I think what we were talking about was the purchase of an easement or fee simple, and not the project design. I think we're looking at 544,000 there and not the 1.6. Is that correct?
That's the way I understand.
Yeah, I don't know that we specifically landed on an amount, because when I introduced the pause, that sort of paused that amount conversation, I was attempting to capture, as you were speaking, and some language that might go in the recommended board action, something like hold back the remainder of funds, meaning that 4.1 million for future passive recreation land committee recommendations, to possibly include awards for the two projects mentioned, as well as potential additional funding cycle awards.
I don't know that that's the way I interpret the conversation to this point. And correct me if I'm wrong, y'all, but I thought that the two projects that we're approving on concept and holding back funds for, basically we've allocated that money. We've said that this money is basically spent. It would leave like 1.6 million in a kitty for future projects.
Well, let's clarify
rough-
that. We can do it either way. I just want to make sure that I'm capturing it. I didn't put in a award. I had put in a 0.
Yeah. So am I right in saying, other subcommittee members, that we like these projects, we want them to move forward, we just need more information? Now, it doesn't mean that we have to get back together as a subcommittee to give final approval 6 months from now or after they've got their studies done. It means that we're leaving it up to staff to award those funds once some of these things have been answered. Am I correct in that? We are not volunteering to regroup again after more information is collected, that this money, as far as we're concerned, is set aside and spent. Is that kind of how you saw it, Ann and Bob?
I'd like to hear that. I do want to clarify the staff recommendation that I was bringing in would be to not award funds to the project at this time, which is a nuanced slightly different.
Yeah, Robert, I think my thing is I didn't want the county commissioners to spend the money. I wanted to make sure it was there if these two projects got their act together. But I guess the issue with saying the money's already spent is, what if they never do? What if the town of Weaverville project falls apart? Well, we'd want to then reward that money to somebody else. So I guess, my initial response is, I want some language sent, hey, we like these projects. They just need more work. Whether that is we have to go through a whole nother round of bond projects, it's fine. I would like to award these two. I just don't know. I guess it's semantics of your language. And that would be the hard part for me is, what if they can't get these other things done? Then what happens to that money then? I guess you can't really allocate money that you can't spend, I guess.
Yeah. So I'm trying to simplify things here, or at least make it understandable to me. Rachel, can we just go ahead and do an experiment of, and for lack of anything better to say right now, the 550,000 to the town of Woodfin to hold back, and I'm confused about where we're ending up on the it was a 4 million or something needed for Weaverville.
So Weaverville's ask is 952.
Right.
And fans ask at this point for the more expensive of the two most recent options on acquisition was 544. If you all chose to award that, we would have 2.6 million remaining. Staff's recommendation was that it's not ready for an award. I understand, and we've talked about previously, all awards will have contingencies. There are terms and conditions that must be met in order for a project to draw down funds. So we have a safety net on all awards.
Clarification. So is the definition of awarding, if we say hold back this fund for this project, this fund for that project, that falls under the definition of us awarding it today, and that's what you're recommending against? Or we're just saying don't put any fund in there yet, but tell the county commissioners we want them to save what money we've got left over for that possible.
Tim, who's unmuting, and Amy, if you're listening.
Okay.
Yep. I'm glad to.
So I just want to make sure I understand.
Yeah, no, words matter. So this committee is tasked with making a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, and I know y'all know that. The only entity that can make a financial determination to award, quote unquote, award funds, Bob, is the county commissioners. And so you're making a recommendation to the county commissioners, who would then accept, reject, edit your recommendation, just like they would anything else, and then task Rachel and her team to create the contractual documents that would then create that the contract, which would then allow to create a legal document between the two entities.
That's right. I used the wrong term. So I know that we just make a recommendation. I guess to rephrase my question, if we make a recommendation to the county to hold back these funds, we're not really awarding it. So we could do that, right, Rachel? You're not saying we shouldn't make a recommendation and in the process say, we recommend you hold back these funds for these two projects.
It's difficult to know what would go into a contract for Town of Weaverville at this time, given that the scope is so up in the air. And staff would be challenged to move ahead with the project because with the amount of unknowns and changing information. FANS is a little different in that it's property or a collection of property and or easement acquisitions. So it's not really a contract, but it has a similar number of unknowns and risks.
Okay.
So my message that I carried in on behalf of staff was essentially not asking commissioners to award these two at this time. Your minutes could reflect support for the project and an inclination to make a future award.
Right.
And the recommendation to the Board of Commissioners could be to leave that $4 million sitting pending future passive recreation land subcommittee recommendations, knowing that your first two places that you would be looking for a future recommendation is these two projects. And any others that might come our way through a process.
And so I guess flipping over that part, I guess the bigger question is, let's say we vote right now, whatever the vote is, what happens to the committee after this? And I guess for me, that's the bigger, are we going to meet in 2 months, 3 months? And I guess if I had a clearer picture of what happened after today, that allows me to, I would vote easier, I guess.
If we had a zero balance, we would be talking with you about dissolving this subcommittee that has run its ad hoc course, and you all would return to your primary duties as the passive or as the Parks, Greenways, and Recreation Board members or the Land Conservation Advisory Board members, because there's future work to be done if this scenario is followed through. I would see talking with legal to make sure we have a mechanism to not dissolve, but pause until a date when the group reconvenes. Figuring out what that time to be determined is exactly going to look like might be informed by what staff hear as we work with these two projects. It might be in 6 months, it's April, and we feel like we're ready to call the group back together. Maybe all 7 people are available to come back into your seats. Maybe different shuffling needs to occur if people have made changes, moved away in that interim, but the subcommittee could reconvene at that time, or in 9 months, or in 12 months, depending.
Could we, I mean, would it make sense for us, will that naturally happen, or would it make sense for us to make a motion that we would like to continue in existence if it doesn't zero out, if there are further discussions? I mean, I'm totally willing to come back in a year. I've got 2 more years on my term, I think, or a year and a half. So
we would certainly have updates to provide you, even if there's no action to be taken. If we wanted to choose a date, come back in a 6-month time frame and hear updates on projects, and then determine a future course from there. We may say, okay, we're ready to open something up. We might say, okay, let's take another 6 months.
Sorry, the subcommittee won't dissolve if there's money left over. It'll just still be possible to call us together, whoever is around.
My understanding.
Okay, that sounds fine to me.
Rachel, can I ask another question here?
I love that you ask permission to ask all the questions. Yes, David,
my
fire
mom
away.
my mom raised me right. What can I say? So, Can we recommend what we have funded and then recommend to the county commissioners that we have another round of funding in the spring? Like another, I mean, how do we go about going to, I mean, I'm not saying we'll go through the whole process again. I know it was long, but we have money left over. And it seems like it's in our best interest and the stewards of the bond money is to have it spent on projects that benefit Buncombe County. And as Tim was saying, it seems like other people might recognize, hey, I have a $300,000 project that, you know, this fits into that. And so can we, because to me, let's fund these projects. We can tell the fans and the town of Weaverville that we're going to have another round. Please reapply, knowing we already know your projects, but hopefully in 6 months, your projects will be further along. We want to reward your projects. You're just not there yet. It gives them something, you know what I'm saying? It gives us a focal point, you know, so that, I don't know if that's something we're allowed to recommend. I mean, I know about county commissioners can laugh at us, but you know.
That sounds like a really feasible recommendation.
And I just would, if that all happens, I would want to prioritize, and I don't know if that would make a motion, but prioritize that whatever funding's left when we reconvene to discuss things, those are our two priority projects. And then if other new projects are there and there's money for them, then start looking at them rather than look at all of them equally right off the bat, because we've spent so much time and there will be a lot more staff time spent trying to get these two projects up to speed. So to me, they would be the priority. I don't know if we can word that to the commissioners, but
no, but I don't know that you need to, Bob, because the bottom line is when you come back, we already have prior knowledge of these projects.
Right.
There's no way in the world that any other project is going to be of equal footing. We already know them. They're going to have that advantage. We just need them to move their projects farther along. So
yeah. Okay.
I would think that, I mean, I'm in agreement with you, but you couldn't make them equal, you know, unless we all just leave the committee, if they're going to have the advantage.
I'm always the worrier, David, so that's why I bring those things up. Okay, thank you. That makes me feel better.
So based on these comments, then we would pull those monies off this scenario, that column you're working on right now, and vote on that without those dollars allocated, as that right now that those two yellows are allocated. Pull those out, vote on what's there, and just ask that the county commissioners consider, you know, don't spend this money, especially this money that we've kind of approved on concept, you know, certainly hold back funds, because we can't tell for sure what commissioners are going to do, but as long as they understand these are very good projects, they just need to be, you know, pushed forward a little bit more. So am I understanding that's kind of where we land right now, that we could motion to approve scenario 2 awards, and is everybody comfortable kind of with that idea, knowing that we haven't really actually earmarked money for these two projects?
I'm comfortable with that. And Robert, I think also it's just, we need to make county commissioners, you know, in the recommendation, let them know we want to spend the rest of the money. We want to open this up to other people. Don't think this is excess money. It's just that there was more money than we needed, but there are other projects that are coming up that people just haven't thought about. And you know, please let us do our job, I guess, or our volunteer job, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'd like to ask, I'm sorry, there is. I was going to say, is there any more discussion?
I just wondered if there's going to be prepared remarks that either Matt or Kevin are going to present. Can we kind of look at those prepared remarks before they go?
I was going to recommend that we do. Maybe one of them wants to do it, or maybe both of them together, but they should run it by all of us. We should see it and agree that we like what they're saying, or if we think of something that they left out, we could say, hey, why don't you stick this in? I think, and to make a very strong statement for them to say, I think that would be great.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to see.
Rachel, this is a clarification question. Does that have to be on the record? Does that, you know what I'm saying? We're not supposed to communicate by email or whatever because it's legally has to all be on
yeah.
record.
All of
And,
our work is done on the record. Even when we do it in an email, it's subject to public record requests. We wouldn't be able to meet via email, like I'll be on an email communicating because that would violate open meeting rules. But we could do the thing where we send out a document or draft to the team and say, please reply to staff with any questions and comments.
Okay.
And we kind of collect and compile. It will come as no surprise to the members of the subcommittee. Staff has already begun work on some draft slides that will accompany this. So as those come together and are updated to reflect today's work and we hone in on that language, we would like to make sure that everybody sees it and feel like it reflects what you voted to support before it goes public.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
There was a conversation earlier in the meeting about voting on these as a full slate, and then Amy Broughton, county attorney, put a remark in the chat about a preference for voting individually. So just pointing that out to our interim chair, Mr. Gale.
So I don't think any of us mind doing it either way. We want to know what it sounded like your direction was that you wanted them in one full slate, but apparently we can vote for them one by one right now. Is that what you're saying? It sounds like we got two messages there.
Yep. I wanted you to see that Amy sent a message after. Amy, your camera's on. Can you speak to that?
Sure. Excuse me. No, it's just given the discussions that you guys have had concerning prices to be paid and everything like that, I was hopeful that you could just, there's really not that many, go down and do them individually, just so there's no confusion about what is being approved, what recommendations you're making per individual. I just want the record to be clear, you know, for anybody who, since this is public, and I'm sorry if I've conflicted with Rachel, I generally defer to her. This just is one of those things where I'm an Oxford comma person, like, let's just do them individually.
I have hidden those other columns to get them out of the way to make it easy to see the name and the amount.
Yeah, so I think let's just go ahead and start with the first one. If this is okay with the subcommittee, let me know if it's not. Okay.
Please proceed, Bob.
Okay, let's start with the first one is Asheville Greenworks, Friends of Hominy Creek. The amount we're proposing to recommend in our recommendations is $312,834. Any discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, then that amount is approved for a recommendation. Balsam Gardens, we have.
I'm sorry, Bob. Amy, do we have to do a name rollout call vote? Or can we just?
No, it's fine. Because first of all, they're unanimous so far. If there is any dissent, then I think that we can certainly do that, but they're unanimous and they're not actually distributing any money. They're just making recommendations.
Okay.
So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking that and thanks for answering, Amy. For Balsam Gardens, our proposal is $1,090,000. And we're putting the terms and conditions in that also, Rachel? Fair market value not to exceed this amount, or does that need to be in there?
I can keep it as notes.
Okay, so in the vote, it's basically, there's the amount, I just said that. All in favor of supporting that amount in our recommendation, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, then that passes. Camp Greer, Works Community, Forest Trail Development, $675,000. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That amount is approved. Okay. Do we do the 0 ones too, I suppose?
You,
Do them all.
Okay. All right. The Friends and Neighbors of Swannanoa, we're proposing $0 at this time. All in favor?
aye.
Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion passes, the proposal passes. The Haw Creek Community Association, we're recommending $102,182. All in favor? Aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? I guess it's obvious. We're getting 4 ayes, but I'm saying it to be proper. Riverlink, $200,000 being proposed. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Let's see, where are we here? Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy, $1 million for Beaverview Mountain. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I heard a 4th aye.
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 Okay, yeah, all right. I'm sorry, somebody was a little quiet. All opposed? None opposed. That passes. Town of Black Mountain, $575,000. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? There are none opposed. Town of Weaverville, at this time, we're proposing $0. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I don't think I heard Ann.
Aye.
Okay, that's 4. Just to make sure, any opposed? Okay, that was unanimous. And where am I? The town of Woodfin, $2,195,231 is being recommended. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And none opposed. So that passes. And Warren Wilson College, $141,580. All in favor? Aye.
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 And none opposed. So that passes. So that completes our voting on amounts at this time to recommend to the Buncombe County Commissioners. And I congratulate you all and everybody for all the work that's gone into getting us to this point and the future work we still have.
You're here.
Rachel, are there any closing statements needed from your direction? Or I guess we're also talking about next step for the subcommittee. We kind of talked about that already.
That ended up getting kind of rolled into the conversation.
Yeah.
So just generally recapping the next steps for the recommendations going to commissioners. We talked through what that process will look like. Staff has the good fortune of being able to contact all 11 organizations with the good news that the subcommittee supports their projects. We will let them know depending on what the specific vote was related to their project, what to expect going forward. 9 of them, of course, are amounts for consideration for the for board action next month, and 2 will be working with them. So their messaging will look a little bit different in terms of invitation to sit down with staff and work on the specifics of moving their projects forward. Post commissioner vote, we of course will be moving into the implementation phase. And so we will keep the committee posted. You'll hear from us when we have a draft of those materials to go to the Board of Commissioners. We can send you invitations for those meetings should you have interest and availability to come along and attend those. Those meetings are open to the public and would love to have as many of you that want to and can attend to be there. And then we will put our heads together as staff about the right timing to reconvene you in the calendar year 2025. I think we said spring, at a date and time in the future to be determined.
Okay, thank you, Rachel, very much. And I'd like to thank you and all of the staff in the past, all these months and today for being available to answer all of our questions. And we'll be having more discussions in the future, I'm sure. So thank you all so much.
Indeed.
And thank you, subcommittee.
Gratitude to the subcommittee for sure. This has been quite the feat, and we appreciate your time and your wisdom and expertise.
You got thrown in to bring it all together in the end, Rachel. That was you had the hardest part, maybe, in a way.
We can make things work as a team.
That's right.
You've done an excellent job navigating the different screens and all the information today, by the way. Really,
Yeah.
You know your way around that computer very well. So thank you for all the help digging up those files we needed. So appreciate that.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Well, I'd like to, I don't know if we need a motion, but I'd suggest we adjourn this meeting now and everybody can get back to what they need to be doing. So we don't need a vote on that, right?
I don't think
you get to just end it, Bob.
All right.
You have the power.
I'm making an executive decision. Everybody go home.
Great job, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye all.
Bye.